Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're doing a brake job on an 06 Saab 9.3. We'll be doing the rear brakes and the front brakes today. One thing just to get out of the way here on this, I will not be showing the brake flush in this video, but if you're doing the brakes, you should be doing a brake flush too. Those go hand in hand, but I won't be covering that today in the video because it'll probably be long enough as it is without the brake flush. So now let's take a look at the parts that we're going to need to do this, and then we'll jump to the tools, and then we'll get back here to take a look at the car.
Alright, so for the brake parts, I went with Bosch rotors and pads. And so I've got some of my rotors here. Let me open up one of the rotors here just to show you what it looks like. One of the things I liked about the Bosch rotors is they actually come with a coating on the inside that's supposed to make them more corrosion resistant compared to your auto parts store branded parts that are a little bit cheaper. Bosch has been making brakes for a long time, so as you open up the box here, you can see how this is nicely sealed. We don't want these to get that rusty. These are supposed to come ready to be assembled and put on, and worth it for the extra couple dollars. If you look at the edge here, you can see where this is a solid edge. This one here is not vented. These are vehicle specific, and there's actually a set screw that goes with these on the Saab 9.3. You can see there's a spot for the set screw. I actually ordered a kit of replacement set screws just because they're very difficult to find locally, and if you're going to replace your rotors, you might as well replace your set screws. So then I got rotors, and then I've got brake pads. So here's just looking at how the brake pads come. I'm not going to open all the boxes here, but just wanted to show you what I ordered. And so then these brake pad kits come with springs, again depending upon the ones you order. These are vehicle specific. They're nicely wrapped and packaged, as you can see, and here is one of the pads. This has the butterfly clip on top as well. You can see here is one of the rotor pads, or brake pads. We've got clips, hardware, and if I'm not mistaken, I thought this is supposed to come with, there it is. And then we have a little bit of synthetic brake lubricant. So it even comes with the lube that you need for greasing the pins on your brakes. So this is all nicely packaged together out of the box. I'm having to just put this together right now. And so then these are the other size. Then on my vehicle, there are different sizes for the front and the rear. And this is packaged very similarly. And now I've got two more rotor brake boxes. And so now here's my other size rotors. These are the larger ones. Open the box. These come packaged one per box if there's any doubt about that. And then here you can see the vent on the side and the anti-corrosion. There is no other hardware that comes with these. And so then because I ordered the set screws to go with the rotors, I got a parts bag that Euro Parts sent me. Take that out of the shot. And here are the set screws for the front and the rear rotors. And then that little black thing there is my gasket for my oil drain plug. To be able to replace that when I do the oil change, that'll go with this. So here's just a look at the parts that I ordered. We'll go on and get ready to do the job. To get started on the front brakes, here's the tools that you're going to need to do the job. Besides a jack and jack stands, there's a few specialty tools here that you may want. So the first thing on your wheels before they even come off, some Saabs 9.3s have these little lug nut caps that have a specialty tool that actually is sold with them. And if you're not lucky enough to have that, you can have a pair of adjustable needle nose pliers to pop those off, and those snap back on once you get the wheels on. So once you get the wheels off and you've got access to everything, a couple of specialty tools you're going to want is an E20 external Torx socket. And then you're going to need a 7mm hex to be able to remove the guide pins. And then you're going to need a 5mm hex to be able to remove the set screw on the rotor if you're replacing the rotors. You're also going to want a flathead screwdriver or other pick for removing the plastic caps that cover the guide pins. You also may want a C-clamp or a set of brake pad separators to be able to push back the piston. And then you're also going to want a couple small extensions that are 1/2-inch drive for the E20 Torx. There's a couple places on those where you want where the socket's a little too short, but a 4-inch extension might be a little too long. And so if you've got a couple of these short extensions, would be great. I've only got one. I also have a stubby 3/8 flex head ratchet that I put a 1/2-inch drive adapter on for being able to just work through the tight spaces of the wheel well. 3/8 breaker bar, or 3/8 flex head, 1/2-inch flex head, and a 1/2-inch breaker bar. Again, that 1/2-inch breaker bar is primarily for breaking off the E20 bolts that hold on the back of the disc brake caliper assembly. So now onto the car. Oh, you also may want some cardboard to put underneath while you're working on it, just to keep your garage floor clean, and have a couple clean cloths and some gloves for your hands ready. There's one more, and I don't think I want to call this a specialty tool, but a little hack that I love to be able to help deal with the brake lines. That because you've got rubber brake lines and you've got the caliper assembly that you need to be able to keep out of the way, but not have them supported by the brake lines, I've got a pair of these, they're about 12 inches long, bungee cords with metal ends on them that I can attach up into the assembly, into the strut spring assembly. And then I can put the other hook through the various parts of my disc brake calipers to hang them out of the way. And so our first step is going to be able to hang these after we get our wheel off, of course. And so let's go over to the car. To get started on the brake job, I've already got the wheels removed. See, the car's up on jack stands. I went ahead and did an oil change just because I had the car up. That was about maybe 800 miles early, but if I'm going to do a brake job, have the car up, might as well do the oil and filter change at the same time. So wheels off. Got my parts laid out here. Got my front on the left, the rear on the right. I'm also going to do a tire rotation while I'm at it too, but I'll deal with that later. And here we're going to focus just on the brakes, so front on the left, the rear is on the right. And you can see Bosch is kind enough to put a little diagram here indicating that that's the front, with the arrows in the front. And these over here that have the arrows in the rear. And the same is true with the brake pads. You find the right diagram there, arrows in the front. And this box here has the 2 arrows in the rear. So you can keep your parts separated from front to back. And now we have to get on to removing our parts off of the front. So let's go ahead and get started. So if we're looking at our brake on the car here, if you've never done this before, you may want to get out a cell phone and take a quick picture of this brake spring, or look at how I've got it configured here on the screen. This is how it's supposed to be. When you go to put it back in, you want to make sure you get it put in the same way. So over at the vehicle, I've got my bungee cords here suspended from the coil springs. Now on these, I wanted to have these hanging off of the side where my assembly is right here. And so I've got these ready to go. So when I get this removed, I can hang this right up on here to keep the stress off of the brake line that's located right back here. We don't want to put any stress on that brake line because that is a rubber hose. And so we want to make sure, and this assembly is heavy enough to be able to remove it. One other thing you can cross-reference here, they're on the casting, is it'll tell you the size of the brake rotors. And so if there's any doubt about the size of your brake rotors, you can look right here on the casting, and you should be able to have a little tip for what size your brake rotors are supposed to be. So now we're going to use our E20 and have to get on the back side of a couple bolts. So then on the back side, and I hope you can see this in the shot, there's going to be an E20 bolt located here, and one located right up here, right next to, I believe this is the ABS speed sensor cable. It goes right in front of it, so it's kind of a pain to work around. So we have to remove these 2 bolts, and we can take our breaker bar and put on right here to go ahead and remove it. And then once you've got it broken through at the breaker bar, we can move on to the ratchet. Okay, that's the lower bolt. I'll be able to get that, you can see I can get that hand loose there now. And now I have to be able to get the upper E20 bolt loose. And that's going to be located So the next step is to repeat with the upper E20 Torx bolt that's located, I don't know if you can see my hand here in the frame. If you follow the speed sensor wire down, there's an E20 Torx bolt that's hidden. This is where you need about an inch worth of extensions to be able to get to be able to break that free. And once we've got that free and the bottom one just kind of hand tight, we'll be able to suspend our brake assembly on our bungee cords. So let's go ahead and break that bolt free. With the top bolt broken free, now it's just a matter of me using my ratchet to be able to loosen up that E-Torx bolt to the point that I can loosen up the rest of the way by hand, making sure I steer clear of the cable behind it. Nope. Still more ratcheting required. And this is where having the stubby flex head is sometimes useful for being able to get. So stubby flex head to the rescue. And then we can pull out our E-Torx bolt and we'll set that into our parts tray off camera. And then we've got the other one at the bottom. I'm going to use one hand here to secure the assembly. The moment I pull this bolt off, this thing's going to slide down just a bit. And now I've got to be ready to secure this. You see the holes here for the holder. I can just go ahead and slide that right into, and there's the other one. And those can slide right into the bungee cords. So you can see those are all taken care of right there. And now that assembly is just holding itself. And now we've got our brake rotor. So on the front of the rotor, there's going to be a set screw somewhere that we're going to have to loosen, and once we loosen that, our rotor will pop right off. So let's go ahead and get our hex out to do that. That's going to be the 5mm hex. Now the fun part with this one is because your wheel is able to spin at this point. It may require you having to hold the rotor carefully, like that. You'll get that loosened up, and then because of the flex head, I can just simply do this here to turn this into an easy spin. And as you see, as I back that out, the rotor comes loose. And then like that, my rotor slides right off, and I've got my assembly here. We'll set the rotor off to the side. And as we look at our axle here, now it's the time, if you get out a wire brush if you want to, and clean up some of the surface rust on here, and just make sure it's all nice and clean. I might give a couple shots of some brake clean just to make sure I get some of the surface here nice and all cleaned up and ready to go. So, all right, so now time to clean that. I'll do that off camera. This is where a cardboard tray underneath the wheel will help to just keep your shop clean, to keep the dust off the floor, and so it's easy cleanup. Now it's time to get out the brake rotor, and we're going to verify one more time. This is a front brake rotor, looking at the diagram here on the Bosch box. You can see the arrows there pointing to the front axle. The headlights are up there to denote that it's the front. And so we're going to open up the box, and we've got our cardboard, and we've got our brake rotor all sealed up from Bosch, ready to go. If you buy some cheaper parts, you may have to clean these up with brake clean just to get shipping oil off of them. But because of the way Bosch does their brakes, these are just ready to install as they are. So all I do is unwrap them, and we'll have our brake rotor, and we'll take this over to the vehicle. All right, so back onto the wheel, we're going to want to note the position of where our set screw goes. And if you look at the threaded holes, you'll be able to find the hole that you're looking for. In this case, it's going to be right about here. And then on the rotor, there's a recessed hole that will need to line up with that spot. And that will mount on there. Now just make sure that the rest of the holes are fine. When you get that set screw in, it'll line up all the holes for your axle nuts so that everything works out just right. If you put it in the wrong spot, the rest of the holes won't line up. So that's the other telltale sign that you're in the right spot. So right about there, now we're ready to go ahead and put in our set screw. Now in my case, I actually ordered replacement set screws because it's easy to booger up these screws, so I'm going to use a brand new one. So with my brand new set screw in my bag of parts, I'm going to go ahead and just manually start that, and then as this goes in, we're going to want to make sure that now be careful, you don't want to necessarily over tighten that bolt. Just get nice and firm and snug because the rest of your axle nuts, your wheel bolts, will be able to actually hold that on, and you'll torque those to 80 foot-pounds per bolt, so that'll also secure your rotor as well to the axle. So now that we've got our rotor replaced, now it's on to looking at the brake calipers. So then on the caliper assembly that's suspended here, a couple of things here that we can see pretty easily. Number one, we got this brake clip in front. Let me see if I can turn this around here a little bit. You can see we got this brake clip. We can go ahead and pull that brake clip off. That's going to be securing in the front pad. Depending upon your level of strength, you may need a pair of pliers or something to make sure you don't get the spring to pop into your face. I always make sure you're wearing safety glasses while you're doing this, so that slides off. And then that will allow this assembly to separate, because there's actually two parts here, except for we still have our guide pins holding them together. And so then if we slide the parts back and forth, you might be able to see there as this comes through here, as I can get my outside brake pad out. That slides right out. And now I've got my inside brake pad, and that's actually secured in with a clip or a spring. And so you can use a flathead screwdriver or a small pry bar to just go in and pop that out like that. And then that slides out. You can see the little spring clip on the back. That goes towards the inside. And that's our carrier assembly. And so if you're just replacing the pads, you could stop there. But if you're going to replace the pads, you also want to make sure you take apart and clean your guide pins that holds the carrier to the actual calipers. And we're going to have the piston here that's back here. We're going to have to retract that back because of our brake wear. And so if we look back to be able to do the separation, we've got a cap here, and there's another cap right down here that hold our, there we go, right there, that hold our slide pins or guide pins on. And you can sort of see them right there, and those right in, so we have to pop those caps off. And so just a simple flathead screwdriver. Right there, and you can see there's the cap. Pops right off. Set that aside in our parts tray. Repeat the process on the other cap. Again, being careful with the brake lines. We'll put these back in after we have our assembly rehung. It's actually not a bad idea to do this before you take it off from the back, but it makes it easier to be able to see on camera for making this video. And so now you can see the hex bolts there on either of those guide pins, and those have to be separated. To remove them, now what's important is on top here, where the hooks are going through those, the carrier, the guide pin is what holds that to the carrier. And so the moment we get those removed, we're going to have to readjust what we're holding to be able to protect our rubber brake line. So now, on to our 7mm hex. And now we have to be able to break that free. Okay, so pardon this looking a little out of order. After you get the caps removed, which is the first thing you would do, Then you come back with your 7mm and put it into the blind hole. And break that free and repeat the process. These guide pins will not come all the way out. So top and repeat the process from the bottom. All right, so now I'm going to go back in and remove my hand-placed E20 Torx bolts. That was the bottom one. And now to remove the top one. Now I've got to pay careful attention as I remove the assembly, because you can see where my carrier and my guide pins, I got one all the way out right here. And that's free, but the other one still apparently has a few threads left on it that I have to be able to get with my ratchet that I did not get. And then that'll slide off. So I got my carrier and I've got my piston assembly. Now I can use my holding clips here to be able to hold this, to keep this out of the way. As we look at our carrier, you may want to go clean this up here with a wire brush just to get this all nice and clean. Make sure your threads are nice and clean. And then now on the piston side, you see how far out this brake piston is right here? We're going to want to go compress it all the way down. And so I'm going to use just a simple compression tool here. Some people use C-clamps for this. It makes no difference. You just have to push that piston back in. Now, one little side note when it comes to thinking about pushing these pistons back in, if you've had to add brake fluid recently because of your brake wear, you may want to use basically a basting or a baster to be able to remove some of that brake fluid to make room in your reservoir as you contract this. So now as I spin this tool, this will be able to retract backwards, and as a result of pushing that piston backwards, it'll be causing fluid to be going back into the reservoir, going backwards. There we go. Because if you don't do that, your new brake pads won't actually fit. And so we can also then take out our guide pins. There's one, and push the other one through. And there's two. And so we're going to want to clean these up and lubricate these. So in the box of brake pads, you're going to want to take out an inside brake pad, an outside brake pad, and you'll be able to find a new replacement spring clip. And you should be able to find some brake grease in there. And so then also we got our guide pins that we removed. So now we're going to have to be able to lubricate our brake pins and our brake pads. And so now I'm going to take a scrap piece of cardboard here and poke a couple holes in it. I think cardboard is one of those great mechanic hacks. And with a couple holes in the cardboard that are able to hold our brake pins like that, we can use our brake grease. Now be careful with this. You don't want to lubricate the wrong parts mistakenly. So we're going to lubricate the back side of our brake pads. You don't need much of this to go very far. That's why they only give you one pouch to do all 4 brake pads and all 4 pins per axle. I can just take that goop there. Be careful, you don't want to actually get this onto the braking surface. This is to lubricate the back of the pads and the carrier assembly.
Before moving on, I want to also make sure I point out here that where I've got the white arrow on the screen and the other respective corners, the other pads, make sure you get a little bit of grease right there, because that's going to be where the pads are riding on the carrier and are moving back and forth on, so make sure that side is properly greased as well.
Make sure that the whole thing is properly lubricated. And now with the grease on here, because of the assembly, I don't want to spread this grease. I'm actually going to change my gloves. So time for a new pair of gloves. All right, now with our assembly all taken apart, we're ready to start putting our brakes back together. So the first thing we're going to do is look at our assembly in here, and let's go ahead and put in the brake pad that snaps into place down here. You may have to manually work on trying to get there we go. That slides in just like that and snaps into place. So that's good. And now we can think about the other brake pad. If we think about the way the carrier is going to go on here like this, if I remove one of my bungees, I can take my other brake pad and set that in here just like this to be able to generate my assembly. Just like that. And now I've got my assembly put together. And now it's just a matter of reaching around the back and trying to put in the guide pins to hold everything together, at least to hold the carrier to the calipers. Remove them out of my cardboard and then place them in. Sorry, you're not going to be able to see this too easily on camera, as I have to go around to the back side to be able to get these in. These should be nice and lubricated. And you may have to do a little bit of finagling to get everything just in the right spot to get those pins lined up, but with just a little bit of play, you should be able to get it with no problem. I got some brake grease on that glove, so now I'm going to go by hand, put in my 7mm to be able to make sure I can thread in my guide pin. There we go, that's threaded at the bottom. Go to the one up top. And if you're having trouble getting one of them in place, as long as you got one, you can go in and take your E20 Torx and put that into the assembly.
One important point to add, the tightening torque on the carrier bolts is 155 foot-pounds. That should be checked with a torque wrench.
There we go, that top pin is engaged. I'm just going to thumb those together, because once the screw is engaged, everything is all set, so that I can make sure that my E20 Torx are all put in place. And then make sure you come back and tighten up your guide pins. And then finally, once you've got your guide pins torqued down and you've got the E20 on the back torqued down, we're going to put our caps back on. Those just press into place. At this point, we can remove our bungee cords, grab our brake spring clip, And then we'll get our brake spring clip seated in just like that. And now we are done with this wheel. Move on to the other, lather, rinse, and repeat on the other wheel. And you're all set to go. Put the wheel back on, and you got your front brakes done.